Sorry about that. Like, I'm only using one screen, so it's kind of a little bit more difficult for me to do this. Anywho, so over to the southwest side, we have Fleur in the red. Meanwhile, Ijime, or the Dash, is up in the northeast, rocking the yellow. Looking at both of these guys, I don't really know the I don't really know the mod too much. I don't know the nitty gritty of it, so if I get anything wrong, I apologize. But it looks like they were both of these decks I've seen quite a lot of. I'm glad that the Squiz is getting a little bit more action nowadays, because I'm pretty sure that with some of the adjustments of, I believe the mills got nerfed a little bit, and with the fact that pigs don't body block anymore, I do think that lizards do have more of an advantage here. So it's going to be interesting how these two are going to be diving right into it. Meanwhile, for Ijime is going over for the early 3 squirrels, going for an early attack, it looks like, which is very interesting. So I'm wondering if Fleur's, I don't think Fleur recognizes that right now. So just go ahead and see if they are aware of it. No, not really. So that's going to be quite the predicament, because with the fact that, well, I mean, it's not going to be too bad considering the fact that Fleur's not too far behind in squirrels, but he's going to have to play this very carefully considering how many squirrels that are available for Ijime. And Ijime is going to go for the attack. A pig's gonna go down. It might be 2, depending on how well this goes, but it looks like that's all that's gonna be lost with the commander going down on Ijime's end. And oh my goodness, even with Ijime going down, that is a lot of farms being lost in the early going. So that is like the best case scenario for Ijime in this case. Even with a downed commander in this case, he can easily go in for another attack if he wants to. But I think Fleur might be a little bit more prepared, depending. Since I believe Ijime sold and rebought one, just in case. But yeah, so I guess we can go ahead and look at the economy very quickly. As, yeah, you can see that that's going to be a huge help there, as Fleur being a little bit greedy in the early going kind of went back to bite him a little bit in that one. Alright. Also, let me know if there's any issues going around with the actual recording itself, like any visuals that could be of issues. So, yep. Meanwhile, we do have Fleur going ahead and switching up and going into the Squizzard option. Meanwhile, Ijime is going to go into his tier 2 with the cams as the opening. So I will say, army-wise, you can definitely give the edge over to Ijime. He has the entire flow of the game. He's able to produce a lot more army. Like, the tier 2s are even. Pigeons, I guess it kind of counts, but not really, since they don't really do any damage. But it does help with healing. But the cam could really do a lot of damage, but he has to be careful with it, especially with the fact that he already lost it in the opening. And it's going to be defended very well. Not a very wise decision there for Ijime. I think the better play would have just waited for both of the cams to be available, so that way it can be a lot more damage to be done in that scenario. But it seems like a pretty even, well, with that trade going more so on Fleur's favor, he has the opportunity to continue to build his farms as much as possible. He still has quite a lot of tier 1, so Ijime's going to probably have to think of a different kind of approach into diving into it, which probably means just going into a lot more tier 1s, but it looks like he's just going to go ahead and be a lot more greedy. And I'm not sure about this play, because now that the number of lizards are up to 12, you're going to leave your farms a lot more vulnerable in this scenario. So yeah, it's going to be certainly a very interesting case here, as it looks like Fleur is going to continue to go for the mass tier 1. I think he's just basically saying bump any kind of tier 2, bump trying to get the wolf in this scenario. He's going to try and see if he can lead into his Blizzards here, but the cams are going to go ahead and try and clean a lot of things up, but the cams are going to get surrounded, and it both will go down, and there's still a hefty amount of squirrels on Fleur's end, but not enough to really go ahead and do any kind of serious attack. And now Ijime is going to go ahead and go for the clean, trying to see if he can take more damage than what he does. But right now, it just seems like it's going to be another even split. So right now, Ijime is going to go ahead and just say bump it, go mass squirrel, going up to 21 compared to the dang near 18 and 12, like 30 tier 1 with a combination of the Squizzard in play. So a lot going on here for Ijime. Oh, for Fleur, and I would say Fleur might be in a little bit of edge army-wise, if we look into it. Oh no, Ijime does have more army technically. It's probably because of the fact that the two cams are still into play to help boost it up. And now we're gonna get a tier 3. The boar is gonna come in, which is very interesting. And now we're going to see Fleur dive into some tier 2, and now we're gonna see the mass amount of squirrels doing its magic. One cam goes down automatically, and it's not going to be enough. And now Fleur can just go ahead and go for the kill because there's 180 food dedicated to try to get that boar out. And I don't even think it's going to be able to it's not going to be ready in time. And he's just going to go ahead and go for the clean sweep. And no, he's going to actually pull back here. Very surprising. He's going to have to go ahead and regroup and go ahead and dive right back into attacking because that board's going to come out any minute, and I'm pretty sure he's not aware of it either. He's still going to try and attack as much as he could. Excuse me. But yeah, it's certainly going to be a case as to that board coming out anytime soon, and I'm not too sure if Fleur is aware. He's not aware, so that's going to be interesting on how this is going to play out, as now we're going to see some damage being put on the ferret, trying to do as much damage as possible, but he's going after the Warrens right now. Now he's going to go ahead and go for a full-on attack. And that's going to do it here as Fleur does take game 1. I do think that was probably... I think trying to rely on the boar was probably the downfall in this one. Mainly because the fact that, like, that was so much food dedicated to try and get that boar out of there that late in the game. Especially with how close the bases were in total for that game. So, not a great one in this one, but it is what it is in this case. Oh, okay. Well, you know what? We're not gonna bother trying to change anything. I might get rid of the things. But on the east side, we have FleurDeLys in the FleurDeLys in the blue, while Ijime over in the northwest position, over in the yellow. I mean, goodness gracious, man. So yeah, I'm just gonna say bump it and say goodbye to these because I really don't have time to try to deal with this. Looking at the compositions, Ijime completely, change it up a little bit from what I remember. Like, most of it is the same. The only difference is the owl that comes into play, but it's interesting that he doesn't really have anything to try and fortify himself, so that way he'll be able to build as many owls as possible. Meanwhile, for Fleur, don't change what's not broken. That's essentially the name of the game. There are a lot of mills for both sides in this predicament, so there really isn't a whole lot. I think that these two cabins will be interesting to go in, but you have to go out of your way to get them. And the same can be said for this mill right here. I'm not sure if they're aware. Well, so Ijime is aware of the mill, but not the two campfires. Meanwhile, for Fleur, he is aware of everything. So Fleur has a little bit more information in that regard, as we do dive into the both sides, going starting off with 3 tier 1 Warrens, all squirrels, so pretty even Steven so far. We'll see if looks like Fleur's gonna go ahead and get into his second mill, and meanwhile Fleur is actually gonna go. Excuse me. Ijime is gonna go ahead and rack up his army early on, so definitely different philosophies. As Fleur doing the wise decision into rebuilding his entire army just to match up the same amount to Ijime. As Ijime opens up with cams, we're going to see Fleur start off with skunks. And so far, both scouting has been pretty solid so far. We'll see if any of that changes. But yeah, so far so good. Nothing really like too big. How is everything looking so far for you guys? Just want to make sure that everything is nice and clear. Not sure who is currently here at the moment, but just want to make sure that everything is hunky-dory as we get into the second game. Right now, Fleur has a little bit of an edge on Army, but of course, we're going to see Ijime gonna try and take that mill out, and it's going to be going down, it looks like. So, successfully, 60 food has gone to waste on Fleur's end, but I don't think it's that big of a deal, considering the fact that even though Ijime did take out a mill, he hasn't really added any kind of eco on the second one either. But we are going to be close to that 4-minute mark, so food's going to end up drying out pretty quickly, sooner rather than later, for both of these players. And it's going to be interesting what's going to happen here, as Fleur does end up going back and rebuilding that second one, because he knows that he's going to be on a time crunch before going for under the attack. Now, Ijime is going to go ahead and get into the two, invest in a couple of farms here, just in case. I will say that Fleur right now has a better, a more interesting setup, I would say. Though I will actually, you know what? Never mind. I just realized we have 2 Falcons coming up. We still have the set of cams on the ready, and now snakes are going to come into play, which is going to be interesting because I believe this mod still has snakes being very powerful in this one, because I do know that one tag is enough to kill a pig. So if it does go down that route of it being a starvation game, those snakes are going to be very, very helpful. But now we're gonna go into this big old battle, and it looks like Fleur is wiping the floor with Ijime, and with that he can just go ahead and take out the rest of this eco with no problem. And that's gonna be the goal here, as a lot of investment in that mill is now gone to waste, and that's going to put Ijime in a very, very difficult spot, especially with the fact he doesn't have enough army to really play around with. And this battle is not going to help cases either, as he's going to lose all of his army. And even though he does have quite a lot of a couple of tier 2s available, it's not a good spot whatsoever. So he has to desperately sell a lot of tier 1 Warrens in order to try and get some kind of firepower on the tier 2 side to try and counter this. But we got to go ahead and take a quick look at the army value, and look at that. That's a huge disparity between the two teams, and that's going to do it there, as Fleur ends up taking game number 2 off this board. So for Fleur, he will be up in the north, still rocking the blue, while Ijime going over to the south is gonna be rocking the yellow. So, you know, the classic OG rivalry of this game between the long coats and the civilized. It's gonna be interesting how this plays out, as we do see another change up here for Ijime. This time, since he wasn't really utilizing the mines at all last game, he's gonna go ahead and swap up to the tier, I forgot what that's called, the MGs. But he's gonna actually go for an aggressive play here, going for the early tier 1 Warrens, and Fleur's gonna go ahead and respond in turn, putting down 2 Warrens of his own in very defensive positions. Meanwhile, Ijime probably will have to consider. I'm not really sure if it's a good idea to go after this, especially considering that he queued up a farm as well. That's a dangerous thing, and I got to learn that myself as well when it comes to doing any sort of attacks, is that you may be behind, because I believe both of he will have enough to match by the time they start this fight, so this will be a victory for Fleur, especially with the commander going down. It's not gonna matter too much. So, and okay, that was pretty anticlimactic. All right, cool. So that was game number 3. So Fleur is gonna go ahead and get the clean